Let me stress that what I am about to say is not one of my typical reviews. This is merely my humble opinion on what has occurred in the vampire genre over the last decade. With the ever-growing popularity of movies and shows such as True Blood, The Twilight Saga, and the upcoming series The Vampire Diaries, it seems as though you can't take 2 steps in Hollywood without running into a script dealing with the undead. Hollywood's obsession with vampires is nothing new, but it's what vampires have evolved into that I want to talk about. This commentary is designed not only to give you all a brief understanding of the genre of vampires, but also to educate you on how this genre has changed in recent years and how I personally feel towards it. Also, for the record, I am not one of these people who believe that vampires actually exist. What I am about to describe is the archetypal vampire, the common form of undead that has frightened us since the days of Vlad the Impaler. Throughout this commentary, I will refer to real vampires or true vampires. This is not me saying I believe in these creatures. It is simply a way for me to enforce the common fears and stereotypes surrounding these creatures. For hundreds of years, man has feared vampires. Whether these fears of blood-sucking creatures have ever been justified remains to be seen. But what is obvious is that we humans tend to have a primordial fear of these undead monsters. It is because of this fear that hundreds of books, television shows, and movies have dealt with these supernatural beings. There are numerous versions of how vampires have been portrayed on the big screen in the last century, but for the purposes of this rant, I will cover the main 3 subgenres that encompass nearly all vampire movies. The first and most common form of vampire genre seen in modern-day stories is the romantic vampire. These creatures are suave, sophisticated, as well as sexy and seductive. However, beneath the calm, beautiful skin of these monsters lies the cold-blooded heart of a killer. The common objective for most romantic vampires is to seduce their prey with the promise of love, compassion, and/or sex, only to turn on their victim when they're at their weakest, draining them of their blood. It is this deception that gives this genre such popularity and fear among fans. Perfect example of this type of vampire can be seen in films such as Interview with a Vampire and Bram Stoker's Dracula. The second and much more uncommon form of vampire is found in what I like to call the warrior vampire genre. These creatures are also typically handsome and suave, but their primary motive is not draining the blood of the living. While they certainly carry the same bloodlust of their romantic cousins, these vampires can often be found fighting and battling other immortals, such as werewolves, lycans, other factions of vampires, etc. While this genre is not nearly as large as the romantic genre, it has grown in popularity over the past couple decades, with films such as the Blade series and the Underworld series. The third and rarest form of vampire genre is what I lovingly like to call the sadistic vampire genre. These monsters are not beautiful. They are not sophisticated. They are not fighters. They are simply pure terror and bloodlust. These vampires want nothing more than to tear your throat out on sight and drain you of every ounce of blood in your body. The perfect example of this brand of vampires can be seen in movies such as Nosferatu and 30 Days of Night. Now you all may be wondering why I needed to detail each of these 3 genres of vampires. The reason being is that I wanted to stress that each genre of vampire has one common trait among them, besides needing to ingest on the blood of the living. Every vampire, no matter what genre they fall into, is a constant threat to every living human being around them. At any moment, these creatures may succumb to their craving of human blood and literally suck the life out of you. It is because of this threat that vampires have become so feared by many in our society. Well, I should say used to be feared by our society, because what vampires have evolved into over the last few years is nothing but complete Hollywood bullshit. I fail to see how any protagonist from the Twilight Saga can be called a vampire. These creatures are the farthest thing from the archetypal vampire I have ever seen. The reason I say this is because there is no threat with these vampires! The reason vampires hold so much power in our minds, the The reason they have frightened us for centuries is because they are a constant threat to our lives. Any vampire, whether they are from the romantic, warrior, or sadistic genre, could at any moment feel the need to feast on any human around them. While some vampires may be rational and intelligent, it is this underlying bloodlust that drives our constant fear of them. So in what universe is Edward or any member of his family a threat to any human in these films? They're not. So how in the blue hell can you call them vampires? For the longest time, I failed to see how Twilight was so widely accepted by so many people as a great vampire story when the story contains no vampires. I understand that I am not the target audience for these movies, and I understand that those who enjoy these films are not looking to be frightened, but I fail to see how anyone in their right mind can call these characters vampires. These protagonists are nothing but shadows of what a true vampire is. Not only that, but this movie fails to fit any of the genre films I mentioned. And for those of you who would say that these films fall into the romantic genre, you'd be wrong. Romantic vampires, since their earliest form, have always been about bloodlust first, emotion second. This holds true for even the most classic of tales, Dracula. Sure, Dracula falls in love with Mina, but he constantly has to hold back the urge to suck her dry. This theme is at the heart of any romantic vampire story. While the vampires may develop emotions for the living, they will commonly fall victim to their lusts and either drain the protagonists of their blood or subsequently turn them into a vampire like themselves. Does this theme ever play out in any protagonist in the Twilight series? No. So again, this film fails to fall under the romantic genre of vampires. Therefore, I believe a fourth vampire genre has been created by Hollywood in the past decade. For the lack of a better term, I like to call this genre the Hollywood vampire genre. These characters display no common traits to any vampires throughout history, though they do like to stare in the girl's eyes for hours on end. They never feel the need to quench their thirst for human blood, but they do feel the need to dress like they just finished shopping at Hot Topic. That's not a true vampire! That's well, I don't know what that is, but it's certainly not the archetypal vampire. It can only be described as the Hollywood vampire, and Twilight certainly fits that description. Now let me say one thing before I finish this rant. I don't mind if women like Twilight. Some of you are probably wondering, well, what the hell have you been ranting about? There is absolutely nothing wrong with women, young or old, liking these films. Why do I say that? Because if nothing else, these movies are eye candy for the hundreds of thousands of women who watch them. I have gotten numerous admissions from several of my best friends that they could watch Robert Pattinson walk on screen and juggle for an hour and a half, and they would love every second of it. You would think I would have a problem with this, but I don't. There have been hundreds of movies over the past few decades that have been nothing but sexy-ass women wearing nothing but the tightest of clothes. So it's only fitting that women should have a film where they can stare at hot guys who make them wet their pants every time they look at them. And for those of you who say that these films are not eye candy for women, I offer you the Twilight Saga New Moon trailer. Just look at how many shots of shirtless men you can see in this preview.
What the hell were you thinking?
The Volturi will kill him if he reveals. I'm scared.
I rest my case. Now, I have probably damned myself by doing this rant. I doubt I will have any chance with any woman who enjoys the Twilight series after this rant is posted, and it seems as though 99% of women love these movies. So be it. I am a lover of the vampire genre, and I am tired of seeing this classic genre being mutated into something it is not. Again, to all of you fans of Twilight, I have no problem with you enjoying these series of books and movies. Simply realize that this is the systematic destruction of vampires as we know it. Because from one horror fan to another, vampires do not sparkle! Take care.